Have you ever wondered about the vastness and nature of space, black holes, and life on another planet? Well, Dr. Avi Loeb, who was named by Time magazine as one of the top 25 most influential people in space, has spent his whole career answering those questions. And he joins us today. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Welcome to Timeless, the show where I discuss, for lack of a better word, timeless, eternal subjects. As I indicated in the introduction, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Avi Loeb of Harvard University today. Actually, I just said doctor. I meant to say professor, though he is probably a doctor. I'm going to ask him in this first question. Professor Avi Loeb is an expert on space, specifically on extraterrestrial life. As I said, he was named by Time magazine as one of the top 25 most influential people in space. He is the longest serving chair of Harvard's Department of Astronomy, and he served as a member of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology in 2020. He has authored 700 plus research articles and several books, including Extraterrestrial, the First Sign of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth, and the forthcoming book, Interstellar, The Search for Extraterrestrial Life and Our Future in the Stars. Hello, Professor Loeb. Thank you for coming onto the show.
Thanks for having me.
So are you a doctor? Did I get that right?
No, you could have saved some time if you introduced me as a farm boy, because I'm still quite loyal to my upbringing.
That's right. Before the show, we were talking about the fact that Professor Loeb grew up in Israel, and I was telling him about my time in Israel and how much it impacted me. So it's a great segue to the first question. We could talk about Israel the entire show, but we'll eventually move on to space. But you said that you grew up on a farm, so tell me a bit about your childhood and also what sparked your lifelong interest in space.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm and collected eggs every afternoon. And on weekends, I used to drive a tractor to the hills of the village and read philosophy books. I was mostly interested in the biggest questions that we can ask, and in particular, curious about existentialism, which was very trending at the time and still is. And basically, the philosophy of not pretending to know more than we actually know, not putting makeup on our knowledge and on ourselves. And that shaped my career, because I remember asking difficult questions at the dinner table, and the adults in the room would either pretend that they know the answer and they actually didn't know, or they would brush off the question. And I realized that the only way for me to figure out the answer is by finding it myself, by becoming a scientist. I was recruited to the Israeli military, that's obligatory, but I preferred to do intellectual work, and I was good in physics, so they allowed me to pursue that in promoting the defense of the country in a special program that recruits 20 to 30 young individuals every year. And I finished my PhD in physics at age 24 and also led a project that was funded by the US. It was the first international project to be funded within the Strategic Defense Initiative of President Reagan. And as a result of that, I visited Washington, and one thing led to another. I received an offer for a fellowship, a postdoctoral fellowship at the Institute for Advanced Study, where Albert Einstein was faculty decades earlier. And I couldn't decline that, but the condition was that I'll switch to astrophysics. And then I was offered a position at Harvard and eventually got tenured. And at that point, it looked like an arranged marriage. But I realized that this subject that I'm married to is actually my true love, because in astrophysics, you can ask big questions about where we came from, where we are going, and do it in a scientific way. So in fact, make progress.
Wow. what a life. It's amazing that with all of that, you didn't get a doctorate, but it seems like you should get at very least an honorary one. So let's talk a little bit about some of the basics of space. I would like to ask you what's both, again, such a simple question, but also such a complicated question. What is space?
Right. So space is anything beyond the two-dimensional surface of the Earth that we live on. So we happen to live on a rock that was left over from the debris of the formation process of the sun. That's the Earth that we call our home. Turns out that there are tens of billions of other stars like the sun within the Milky Way galaxy, our own galaxy. And there are about 1 trillion galaxies like it in the observable volume of the universe. And actually, we believe that the count of galaxies extends even to a scale that is 10 billion times larger in volume. And so there are plenty of more Earth-like planets in the observable volume of the universe, and there are grains of sand on all beaches on Earth. So everything beyond the surface of Earth is called space. To think that we are at the center of the universe is arrogant in my view, because, the human species came to the stage only a few million years ago, which is a small fraction of the age of the universe, 13.8 billion years. And moreover, we are not at the center of the universe. We know that because the Earth moves around the sun moves around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So if you come to a cosmic play and you are not at the center of the stage and you come at the end of the play, then the play is not about you. And that is why I'm very interested in space, because we might find other actors and then we could ask them what the play is about.
Well, I don't want to jump the gun here, but of course the logical follow-up question is, are we alone? Are there other actors? And if so, Who the heck are they?
Well, a few months ago, I attended a special event in Las Vegas organized by the International Women's Forum. I was in an auditorium, the only man with 800 women. And before going there, of course, I asked my wife if it's okay with her. And she approved. She said, take an extra day, which you might interpret as if she really trusts me. I said that obviously the question, are we alone, is not the slogan of a dating site. It's a question that the entirety of humanity needs to ask. And it will have huge implications because, the Nobel laureate in physics, Steven Weinberg, wrote at the end of his book, The First 3 Minutes, that the more the universe appears comprehensible to us, the more pointless it looks. And I say, well, it looks pointless to him and all the cosmologists that work on elementary particles, stars, galaxies, because they are focused on lifeless objects that do not have life in them. If we were to find a partner, just like in our private life, if we find a partner, it gives a whole new meaning to our existence. And the same is true in the context of the universe. If we find another sentient species out there next to another star, it will give a whole new meaning to our life.
So have we found it?
Well, we have some tentative evidence. We've been searching for 70 years with the wrong method, because we were trying to find radio signals. Because we developed radio communication, the assumption was maybe someone else is trying to communicate with us. And of course, that's just like waiting at home for a phone call. If there is nobody active at the time that you're waiting, you won't hear anything. And these radio signals, if they were sent 1 billion years ago, by now they are 1 billion light years away. We have no way of hearing them. And so only if someone is transmitting just at the time that you are listening, taking account of the light travel time, only then you'll detect something. And so a different approach to that is to check our mailbox for any packages, or to look at our backyard for any tennis balls that were thrown by our neighbors. And that's a very different approach, because those packages move at a speed that does not allow them to escape from the pull of gravity of the Milky Way galaxy. So they keep accumulating, just like plastic in the ocean. We keep generating more plastic and throwing it to the ocean. And by 2050, the mass in plastic in the oceans will exceed the mass in fish. That's how bad it gets because it keeps accumulating. And so the same thing may happen in space. If we send 5 probes to interstellar space, they're making their way out of the solar system. That's Voyager 1, Voyager 2, Pioneer 10, Pioneer 11, and New Horizons. And we did it over 50 years. Just imagine if we were to continue doing it in the next million or even billions of years, then obviously we will send a lot of material to interstellar space. And the question is whether someone else did it already. I did an interesting calculation that if we were to pay attention to the words of John Lennon, who said, imagine all the people living in peace. And we were to live in peace, and instead of allocating $2 trillion a year to military budgets, we were to decide to use this surplus, since we will not need it to kill each other, we could use it for space exploration. Then we could send, given that budget, we can send a probe to every star in the Milky Way galaxy, tens of billions of them, within a few decades, by the end of this century. So just imagine another civilization which is peace-seeking, space exploring. They could have done it already, and most stars form billions of years before the sun, so it takes less than 1 billion years for our spacecraft to cross the entire Milky Way galaxy. So the question is there anything around us? We have to look out.
Something just over the last 30 seconds came into my mind, and I'm trying to dig it up from the troves of my memory. I remember about a year or two ago, there was a report from an Israeli scientist who said that that they have established that there is life on another planet, and that life on another planet has established contact with the United States, and President Donald Trump knows about it. Are you that Israeli scientist?
I'm not that Israeli
Okay.
scientist. And the only problem with such a claim is that we haven't seen the evidence. Okay,
Right.
We haven't seen any documentation. So my reply to that would be to say, there are many people who claim that they are Napoleon. And if you were to ask them for their ID, it will not show Napoleon. And of course, you can say anything you want if you don't provide the evidence. And as a scientist, I'm guided by evidence. If this person would have delivered us some evidence, then it would have been much more believable. I should say that the US government has an office now that was established by Congress that looks into all the evidence associated with unidentified aerial phenomena. And actually, the head of that office visited my home a couple of months ago, and we even wrote a scientific paper together. So, I haven't seen convincing evidence on that front because I didn't see any of the classified data that exists within government. But since the sky is not classified, I established the Galileo project. And we are actually looking, we built a new observatory that is surveying the entire sky 24/7 in the infrared, optical, radio, and audio. And we will analyze the data using artificial intelligence software. So we will classify anything we see, either as a natural object, like a bird or a bug, or as a human-made object, like a drone, airplane, or a balloon, like the ones that were shut down by the US government. And of course, none of these excites me. The question is whether there is anything else that may have come from an extraterrestrial civilization.
Forgive me if this is just my lack of understanding and you clarified this, but I feel like I'm hearing two conflicting messages. On the one hand, you're arguing that we live in such a vast universe. We're one of just trillions and trillions of galaxies that exist. And what I'm hearing from that is, well, there's no way that we're alone. But then with regard to this example with the Israeli scientist that is not you that I just brought up, you said there's not evidence, maybe not of that specific contact with the United States and another planet, but what I heard from you is that there's no evidence that there's other life. Am I understanding that wrong? Is it that you are unsure if there is other life, or are you pretty certain that there might be?
No, I was referring to possible classified data that the government has that was not publicly released.
Oh,
I haven't seen it. And I'm saying we don't need to wait for the government to declassify its data because it was collected by classified censors. That's why they do not release it. And if it exists, just talking about it doesn't convince me because I want to see the data and the evidence before I say anything. But if you ask about the more general question, over the past decade, astronomers discovered the first 4 objects from outside the solar system that entered the region where the Earth moves around the sun. And the first one reported was the size of a football field. It was discovered by a telescope in Hawaii when it came close to Earth, and it was given the name Oumuamua, which means a scout in the Hawaiian language. That's an object that I discuss in my book. And of course, the initial assumption was that it's actually a rock from another planetary system like the solar system, but it looked really weird. It didn't look like an asteroid, not like a comet. As it was tumbling every 8 hours, the amount of sunlight reflected from it changed by a factor of 10, and that meant that it has a very extreme shape, at least 10 times longer than it is wide, projected on the sky as it was tumbling. And moreover, the best shape was that of a disk, a flat shape. And then the object was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force. And it's mysterious because there was no evaporation of this object, no cometary tail, as we find in the context of comets, no dust or gas around it. Yet there was some push. And the only way I could interpret that is that the excess acceleration, non-gravitational acceleration, is a result of the object reflecting sunlight. And that meant that in order for sunlight to be effective at pushing it, it must have been very thin. And that led me to propose that maybe it was artificial in origin. And 3 years later, the same telescope in Hawaii discovered another object that was thin because it was pushed away from the sun by reflecting sunlight, no cometary tail. And then the astronomers realized that it's actually a rocket booster that was launched in 1966 by NASA. So we definitely know that this one, which was called the 2020 SO, was artificial in origin because we produced it. The question is who produced Oumuamua, the first object. And then with my student, we discovered 2 meteors that collided with Earth. These are objects roughly 0.5 meter to 1 meter in size that exploded in the Earth atmosphere as a result of the friction with air. And they were moving so fast that we could conclude that they came from outside the solar system. And the US government confirmed that. And moreover, based on data from the US government, we could tell that the material strength of these objects, these interstellar meteors, was tougher than all 270 other meteors that were in the catalog. So these were of some unusual material composition, and they were the first interstellar meteors. And we don't know if they are made of some exotic natural material or maybe some alloy that represents a spacecraft. And the way to find out is to collect the relics. And we are going to do that in the Pacific Ocean this summer 2023. I already got funded at $1.5 million. We have a boat. We have an exceptional team of people who have experience in ocean expedition. And we're going to look for the fragments of the first interstellar meteor and check what the composition is. Is it a natural object or maybe artificial?
That's amazing. I'll have you back on in a year and you can tell me what you concluded. What is, in your view, the coolest fact about space? If you could just tell the audience one piece of information that they have to go through their life knowing about space, what would that be?
Well, there will be two. One has to do with how the universe started. Um, we see the universe expanding, and if we go back in time, it reached infinite density at some point in time because it's getting rarefied over time. And if you go back, there was this point in time called the Big Bang, where the density was infinite, density of matter. And Einstein's theory of gravity cannot really tell us what happened before that. And by the way, there is no center to the universe. I explained that to my freshman seminar students today. They were wondering about that. Actually, every point in the universe is sort of, you can call it the center, because you see the same things happening at every point. The universe started from nearly the same initial conditions everywhere. And there was a point in time that is called the Big Bang. The question is, what happened before that? And we don't know because we don't have a theory that unifies Einstein gravity with quantum mechanics. And there is a possibility that the universe went through bounces, that it contracted and expanded in cycles. There is also a possibility that I thought about, that once we have a theory of quantum gravity, our engineers will figure out a way of creating a baby universe in the laboratory. So maybe our universe was created by some intelligent beings in white lab suits, and in that case, it's just like we give birth to babies and they mature to become adults and give birth to new babies, and it goes on and on. So we don't really know. So that's one fun fact about the universe. How did it start? What was there before? And the second is that we have objects in the universe that are really unusual, that very different from our experience, and these are called black holes. I was the founding director of the Black Hole Initiative at Harvard that brought together physicists, mathematicians, philosophers, and astronomers who are all interested in black holes. And we obtained the first image of a black hole in our conference room that appeared in many newspapers a few years ago. But the unknown about black hole is what happens as you fall into it and you get to the center of it. And one day I had a flood in the basement of my home, and I brought in a plumber. And as we looked into the sewer, we realized that it was clogged by roots of trees, the nearby trees. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe that's what happens at the center of a black hole, that the material that falls into it, creates a central object. It keeps accumulating because the sewer is clogged. There is no way else to go there. And of course, we don't know what happens. And if you wanted to know, you would have to jump into a black hole, and we know where they are, and we can take a trip. But I wouldn't recommend it even to my string theorists who have predictions for what happens there, because once you get into a black hole, it's the ultimate prison. You can check in, but you can never check out, and you will not survive very long before you get to that center where your body would be ripped apart.
I guess, how do black holes work? Are they're forgive my stupidity, are they their own galaxy, or do they just float around in space? I mean, I cannot conceptualize how they are able to exist.
Well, it's an interesting story. The first solution of a black hole, in the way that we think about it today, was derived only a few months after Albert Einstein came up with his general theory of relativity that describes gravity as the curvature of space and time. So the innovation of Einstein was to pay attention to the experiment of Galileo Galilei that realized that all objects fall the same way under gravity. And in fact, there was an astronaut that went to the moon and dropped a hammer together with a feather. And since there is no atmosphere on the moon, they arrived to the ground exactly at the same time. That shows that all objects, irrespective of their composition or their mass, behave under gravity the same way. And that's what Einstein found remarkable. And that led him to conclude that gravity is not a force, the way electromagnetism is. It's more a property of space and time, that space and time are curved. So if you imagine a trampoline, the surface of the trampoline, if you put a heavy object in the middle, it's curved. And then if you put a marble, it would move in a circle if you give it the right kick around the center, just because of the curvature of the trampoline, the rubber. And of course, if you take away that heavy object from the center, the surface of the trampoline will be flat, and this marble will move on a straight line. So it's the same thing that happens with Earth moving around the sun. Gravity curves space and time and makes the Earth go around the sun. And if you were to remove the sun, the Earth will continue on a straight path. So this was the idea of Einstein. He formulated the curvature of space and time in terms of the matter in the universe. And then he couldn't derive any simple solution to these complicated equations. And then Karl Schwarzschild, who was the director of the Potsdam Observatory, he was a German patriot, went to the German front during the First World War and derived a solution to Einstein's equations and sent him a postcard from the front showing this solution. It was a black hole. Basically, imagine taking mass, let's say mass that makes up the core of a star, and removing its pressure so that it falls to the center. What will be the solution if you put all the mass at a point? That was Schwarzschild's solution that showed that you end up with what we call now a black hole. Basically, you have a point where all the mass went, which is not really a point, as I was describing previously. It may be an object in the middle, but around it, there is a region of space from where nothing can escape, even not at the speed of light. And so this is called the event horizon. So it's basically an extreme structure of space and time. There is nothing really there. It's vacuum. There is a point in the middle. And if you cross the horizon, you can never communicate. You can never send a DM to your friends because nothing can escape from that region. And we know that there is a 4 million solar mass black hole at the center of the Milky Way. We have an image of it. And that has, if you fall into it, it has a size which is, the horizon is roughly 1/10 of the Earth-Sun separation. So if you are an astronaut and you were to cross that region, you wouldn't feel anything unusual. You will cross it, but then you will be sucked to the center and you will find your death there because gravity is so strong that it will tear your body apart. I mean, I once gave a presentation at school to the class of my daughter, and one of the kids asked me, what will happen to me? Can you describe specifically what will happen to me as I fall into a black hole? And I started describing it, and then the teacher stopped me and said, please don't go any farther because the kids will have nightmares.
Oh, gosh. Well, the kids need to be able to handle it. It's our universe.
Well, gladly, we have never encountered a black hole, and we better not. Although there are some benefits there, you age more slowly. So you can imagine opening a beauty salon there where you would live much longer than your friends far away.
I was going to say all the Hollywood stars who are taking Ozempic now are going to go into the black holes of space to be ageless. I just keep wondering, with all that you know about space, do you believe in God? And do you think that science and God are compatible or incompatible?
Well, I do think they are compatible, and I'll tell you why. You probably didn't expect that, but I think that what we imagine as God, I mean, if you look at religious texts, is an entity that has unusual powers. For example, it may have created the universe, it may have created life. And my point is that a sufficiently advanced scientific civilization is a good approximation to God. So if we find another technological civilization that instead of spending only 1 century in developing its science and technology like we did, it had maybe the benefit of 1 million years or 1 billion years. They could do things that for us will look like magic. And
Right.
when we encounter that, it would appear like a miracle. And, like the burning bush if we see, except it would look really different than the burning bush in the sense that it would look like iPhone 100, or it would look like a laboratory that can produce phenomena that we've never imagined possible. And of course, we cannot imagine it because it represents our future, but it's an opportunity for us if we encounter any technological device that was manufactured by another civilization and it's still functional, we could learn from that. And to the entrepreneurs in the audience, I would say you can make a lot of money out of importing that technology to Earth. But I told the curator of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City that if I find any gadget on the ocean floor that came from this first interstellar meteor, that I will bring it for display in New York because it will represent modernity for us. And I should tell you what my dream is. Elon Musk said that he dreams of dying on Mars. My dream is that I will go to space and then the mission will fail and my body in an astronaut suit will float in space and I will die, obviously, shortly afterwards. But that's not the issue. The point is, I hope that Jupiter will give a kick to my body so that I float in interstellar space. And then for 1 billion years, I will go there and until I collide with another planet that is habitable and then burn up in the atmosphere of that planet and look like a meteor. And then I very much hope that a scientist on that planet would say, what is this interstellar meteor? Let's go out to the ocean and collect the fragments of this meteor and then put them on display in a museum. That will be the greatest honor that I can imagine for myself, being respected by another intelligent civilization.
Well, let me tell you, my dear friend, I've never heard that one before. But I certainly hope that. No, it's actually a really pretty amazing thing to contemplate. And I hope that happens for you and for all of us, really, for the history of human civilization. That would be incredible. Finally, I'd like to discuss a little bit about the politicization, if you will, of space. I mean, there are so many avenues that I could take here, not just the way that people talk about space domestically, but I'm actually referring to the space race among our adversaries. I've been reading that Russia and China are planning to jointly administer a base on the moon by 2035. China has talked about bringing colonies to space. And we know that China already has killer satellites in space, which have the capability, among other things, to knock out our satellites. Should we be terrified? I mean, what is the future here going to be if this comes true? And do you think it will come true? Is it really going to happen that Russia and China by 2035 will be able to jointly man a moon base?
Yeah, the more we develop technologies that bring us to space, the more it becomes a strategic asset. And, just like we ventured into the oceans and then had to develop a navy to deal with that. And in the same way, the US now has a space force, and that's because the US has strategic assets in space. And of course, China and Russia wish to have their own. And so I don't see any difference between that and what we encounter here on Earth, in the sense that, we have ground forces, we have the Navy, and in the future, and obviously we have an Air Force, but in the future, the Space Force will get more important because our adversaries are developing similar capabilities out there. And you may ask, why? What is the benefit of the moon? Well, first of all, you could do things there that you can't do on Earth. I mean, technologically speaking, you can develop new technologies and have new infrastructure over there. It also gives you a vantage point to look at Earth from there. And so there would be investment of resources from all nations to go to the moon as a stepping stone before going to Mars. And all of this is for the same reason that we strategically acquire territory on Earth. That there is nothing noble about it, nothing scientific. It's more to do with having more power or a technological advantage over your adversaries. And I don't really think that this would bring humanity to a better place. The way I think of space is completely differently, not for commercial purposes, not for military purposes, but in terms of exploring the unknown. There is no financial benefit to leaving the solar system and no military benefit to doing that. And ultimately, if we want to extend the longevity of the human species, the best way to do that is by moving elsewhere, because there will be a catastrophe on Earth sooner or later. Within 1 billion years, the sun will boil off all the oceans on Earth. So we will need to move elsewhere. And if we think about our future, we need to replicate what we find precious here on Earth elsewhere. And the way I see it is more with the future of humanity, preserving what we find important, rather than the other way around of continuing to fight over territories. And if you just look at Earth, the history of humans was shaped by a group of people trying to feel superior relative to other people, and that triggered all the atrocities, including the Holocaust. And if we find evidence for a civilization that is far more advanced than we are, perhaps it will convince everyone that we should treat each other as equal members of the human species. And it will change our aspirations for the future. That is really my hope.
Professor Loeb, thank you very much for coming on to the show. This has been really fun and has inspired me to learn more about space, and I'm going to begin doing that by pre-ordering your book, Interstellar, The Search for Extraterrestrial Life and Our Future in the Stars. It comes out in August of 2023, is that right?
Yes, that is correct, and hopefully by then we'll know if the first interstellar meteor was technological in origin, and if it was, that would be big news for humanity.
Yes, it will. I am very much looking forward to interviewing you again, specifically about your summer mission. And congrats on your, what was that, $1.1 million funding? Wow.
1.5, yes.
Oh, 1.5,
thank you.
forgive me.
And it's not the only thing happening. A lot of, like last week, I had 20 filmmakers and producers, 20 in 1 week, interested in documenting my research, which I found quite flattering, but I declined all of them. And I also had a playwright approach me that wants to produce a play on Broadway about my research. So, it appeals to a very broad audience, and I get a lot of support from the public.
Wow. Well, congratulations on your success. Well deserved. And thank you for your work.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today, and remember that each of our thoughts, choices, and actions shape who we are. So let's think clearly, choose wisely, and act with principle and determination. See you tomorrow. Take care.